Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is looking at private and royal charities and how they are doing. This will be episode 25. Initially, I will give a short introduction talking about when the Sussexes announced they were stepping back from senior royal duties. I'll talk about the period from January 2020 to March 2020, leading up to the Commonwealth Service and all of the events that took place during that time. I will then go on to discuss briefly charities and patronages that belong to the royal family, how they're chosen, who's got what, taking direct quotes from the royal family's website. I then have a small section on the charities that on paper are listed with various members of the royal family, and I look at, and I've mentioned them before in a previous podcast, the organisation called Giving Evidence, who do carry out research on any number of charities, not just royal. In fact, royal is a very small part of what they do, but they do it from the point of view and perspective of people who donate and those who are thinking of becoming involved in any of those organisations. So they actually look at and produce accurate figures. There is a section on the charities that Harry and Meghan were either patrons of or presidents or vice president of, that were lost when they stepped back. These were the charities that were taken away from them, as far as I can see, as punishment, regardless of the official reason given. It seemed to be very punitive, the feeling behind it. So I list all the ones that they've lost. I then list all the ones that they have retained, the private charities, and the differences between the two. And then I go into more detail as to how those charities are doing outside of the royal bubble. Right, so to begin with, an introduction. In February 2021, UK media had a field day, rejoicing in the fact that Sussexes were stripped of their royal patronages after they confirmed they would not be returning as working members of the royal family. Most logically minded people worked out that Harry and Meghan were not returning to the UK when they left the UK in November 2019 for a 6-week break from the daily venom spouted by UK media and hate groups encouraged by the same media towards the couple. In January, Harry announced that they were stepping back from senior royal duties. It later transpired that most of their belongings from Frogmore Cottage had been removed, and Archie and the family dogs had all travelled out of the UK in November 2019. It was at this point that the Kubler-Ross model of the 7 stages of grief described wonderfully the reactions and behaviour of the royal family and its associates in the media, and following in the smoke flowing from each group, the haters followed along, wondering how their prey had escaped. Shock at the announcements set in, and by March the 9th, 2020, the day of the Commonwealth Service, all those factions mentioned above had worked their way through the denial stage and eventually got to a place where they realised that the family had indeed made plans. And this move was not undertaken on a whim. At this point, the anger stage set in, and from there they fluctuated between anger and depression, spending most of the time in the anger state. This presented itself to a global audience, both in person within the church, as well as the millions watching from various corners of the globe. The anger was plain to see, and was one of the most unprofessional displays by any public body, let alone the monarchy of a nation. It was so disgusting and iconic for all the wrong reasons that it is a moment in history that this royal family will never live down. Never. Every speech they make from that point on most topics, will be negated and refuted by the behaviour of most of the royal family. And if you watch the footage enough times, it is evident that the others knew what was going on, but were doing their best to be labelled, if they were ever accused, "It wasn't me." The Sussexes left the UK shortly after this event. Meghan left the UK within hours of the Commonwealth service ending, and Harry left around 3 weeks later. The royal family decided to put in place a 12-month review to give time to the Sussexes to reconsider their decision and to return to the fold. My interpretation of that 12-month review was to give UK media another year of chasing their prey, in the hope that they would break their spirit and that they would indeed return. In the meantime, they could earn money from the clickbait headlines for another year. Not least because all the others combined did not amount to 1 day of income from a Sussex-related negative article. Let's take a look at charities and who's patron of which charity, various charities, using direct quotes from the Royal Family website, royal.uk. As I say, it's a brief summary. There is more detail in the accompanying article, but it's just to give, if you like, the official version of what a royal patron does and what their charities and how they're chosen and so on. So, the Queen and other members of the royal family lend their names and much of their time to many different charities and organisations. Currently, over 3,000 organisations list a member of the royal family as their patron or president. These range from well-known charities such as the British Red Cross to new, smaller charities like the Rebrand Children's Trust, to regiments in the armed forces. Members of the royal family have links with hundreds of charities, military associations, professional bodies, and public service organisations. Some are well known, while others may be smaller bodies working in a very specialist area or on a local basis only. Having a royal patron or president provides vital publicity for the work of these organisations and allows their enormous achievements and contributions to society to be recognised. Every member of the royal family receives hundreds of requests each year from organisations asking for their support. Royal patrons add status to an organisation, and visits and involvement from a royal patron can often bring much needed publicity. For this reason, members of the royal family tend to limit their patronages to a manageable number to ensure that they can give each organisation a significant amount of their time. The exceptions to this are the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. I have to say here that the website still states the Duke of Edinburgh sharing over 1,000 patronages with the Queen. And this was on the 2nd of December 2021 it still stated these things. Many of these charities where royal family members are patrons were inherited from previous monarchs. The Queen's patronages carries the most weight, and Her Majesty receives the most requests for patronages of all members of the royal family. So, how are these patronages chosen? Patronages generally reflect the interests of the member of the royal family involved. For example, the Duchess of Cornwall is president of the National Osteoporosis Society, as both her mother and grandmother died as a result of the brittle bone disease. Occasionally, a member of the royal family will hear about a cause whilst on a visit or via one of their other charities and will decide to support it. A range of factors are taken into consideration. These include that the organisation making the request is reputable and well established and has a good financial track record. Once it has been decided that the patronages will be taken on, the duration of the patronage must be decided. There is no set limit. Sometimes members of the royal family might take on the patronages relating to a specific campaign or event, which only lasts a finite length of time. Others are for life. I made an end note linked with this paragraph, where we talk about the organisations making requests and that the royal family insist that these organisations, for them to be considered, have to be well established and a good financial track record, etc. I have an opinion about that, which questions that official line. And I will explain the reasons why, and it's at the end, as I said. I actually think it's almost comical when I read the statement on the website, and knowing what we all know that's been in publications, let's say, in recent weeks, and certainly over the years, there have been quite a few. It's not the first time that the question marks around how finances are handled within the royal family itself and their charities. So it seems a little bit rich to expect organisations to be held up to a certain standard when it doesn't appear to be matched elsewhere. But we'll go on to that right at the end. Let's have a look at the work of the research done by Giving Evidence in terms of what benefits do charities have by having a royal patron. As I said, this is linked to the point right at the beginning where UK media took great delight, and it wasn't just one or two articles for one day. It went on for days, and most weeks they like to refer to it, and they still do now, about Harry and Meghan and the word that they used being stripped of their charities, their royal charities where they were patrons, as if somehow they were going to be stepping down into some lower class activity, and also implying that being a patron of a royal charity made you somehow better than others. So let's have a look at what real research, accurate figures, and what it looks like to be a charity under the royal banner. Giving Evidence is an organisation that I have mentioned in a previous article on royal family support for charities. Giving Evidence produced a report in 2020 outlining the outcomes of research undertaken about the added value, if any, for those charities with or seeking a royal patron. Giving Evidence conducts robust research on a wide range of charitable organisations on behalf of donors and charities to help with decision making. The royal family and its involvement with patronages is only one element. That being said, when it came to charities with royal patrons, 74% of charities with a royal patron did not get any public engagements with them the previous year, i.e. 2019. Only 1% of charities which have a royal patron got more than one public engagement with them during 2019. 1%. Giving Evidence said we could find any evidence that royal patrons increase a charity's revenue. We could not find, I should say. There were no other outcomes that we could analyse, nor that royalty increases generosity more broadly. UK charities should not seek or retain royal patrons expecting either many public events with them or an effect on revenue. We could not find any effect of royal patronages on charities' revenues despite multiple sophisticated statistical analyses. Royals do far more public engagement with charities they set up than with pre-existing charities they take on. For example, the Prince's Trust and the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, etc., are 2% of their charity patronages, but get 36% of public engagements that they do with their patron. 26% of Royal's public engagement during 2019 were with patron charities, so taking public engagements as an indicator of workload, they are a quarter of the Royal's work. We could find no effect of that. The data that the Royal Family publishes about its charities and patronages, its term, has many errors, duplications, omissions, and is hard to use. It took us 6 weeks to construct a defensible list. These figures are from Giving Evidence, not the Palace's figures. Tried to analyse press coverage, but couldn't. No country with a resident royal is more generous than countries without. No country with a resident royal family has been in the top 8 most generous countries over the last 4 years. We found no reason to think that charities with royal patrons are better or more effective than those without. There is lots more information well worth looking at in more detail. The organisation has no opinion on royal patrons or royalty. All of their research is carried out to try and ensure that donors and charities can become more effective with the information supplied from the research. Highly recommend that you look at various reports that this organisation has done, not just on royalty. The patronages that Harry and Meghan have lost and retained. Harry is no longer patron of the following: Rugby Football Union, Rugby Football League, both roles taken over from the Queen. London Marathon Charitable Trust. The role was a 3-year term which was renewed twice, covering a 9-year period. Came to an end in January 21 and was not renewed. Harry, a former soldier who served on the front line in Afghanistan, is no longer the Captain General of the Royal Marines. Is no longer Honorary Air Force Commandant of the Royal Air Force Base Honington, or Honorary Commodore-in-Chief of the Royal Naval Command's Small Ships and Diving. Harry had to relinquish his role as President of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. Harry retains the following private patronages or presidencies. African Parks, Nolan Simru, the Hendy van Strandbanzi Memorial Fund, Invictus Games, Map Action, Rhino Conservation Botswana Charity, Centre Bali, Wellchild. The charities that Harry has retained are charities that he set up himself. He chose himself. He has been involved with those from the beginning. They were not royal charities, and they were not given to him by anybody within the royal family, or even suggested. These are all projects that he has started from scratch, working with them, those that were established before he arrived on the scene with them. But he has done all the work and has continued working with all those organisations for many years. Meghan lost the following. She lost the Royal National Theatre. She lost the Association of Commonwealth Universities, both handed down from the Queen. Meghan also had to give up her role as Vice President of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. Meghan retains her two private patronages, which are SmartWorks and the Mayhew Animal Charity. These were chosen by Meghan, personal interests that she's had over the years, helping women and the animal charity, hence why she was allowed to keep those. It is safe to say that I am sure I know in which lists I would like to be included, and none of them involve the royal family. Most of the charities that Sussexes have retained, combined with all the new ones that they have taken on board under the Archewell Foundation banner, have a healthy future, with engagements with the Sussexes and their team. One that is in need of Sussex Squad support is the Mayhew Animal Charity. We'll touch upon that later on in the podcast. There's a section in the article which I'm about to go through now in the podcast, which is a summary of two of the charities retained by Harry and two retained by Meghan, and how they're doing at the moment. So the first one is Invictus and Archewell and Netflix. And these are extracts from the Archewell website. Created by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to produce programming that informs, elevates and inspires, Archewell Productions has announced its first Netflix series, Heart of Invictus, which will be produced and launched in partnership with the Invictus Games Foundation. Heart of Invictus is a multi-episode production that will spotlight a group of extraordinary Invictus Games competitors from around the globe, members of the military community who have experienced life-changing injuries or illnesses, on their road to Invictus Games The Hague 2020, which is now taking place in 2022. Due to necessary rescheduling from the COVID-19 pandemic. Harry is active in all of his named charities and has been embraced into the USA military family. Remembrance Sunday, along with Veterans Day earlier that week, the Duke and Duchess were invited to a number of engagements with military personnel and their families. Prince Harry has been involved in all of his charities since his move to the USA. All of these private charities were formed by Prince Harry, and he intends to continue being involved. More details are on the Archewell website. The second charity that we'll look at, that Prince Harry has been involved in for many years, is Wellchild, the national charity for sick children. A quote from Prince Harry: "These awards were created to shine a bright light on an amazingly brave group of children and young people. Life for families caring for seriously ill children is exceptionally tough. and without Wellchild, it is even tougher. Just a summary, what the charity does. Its general charitable purposes, education and training, the advancement of health or saving of lives. It helps other charities or voluntary bodies and the general public. It also makes grants to organisations, provides human resources, provides services, provides advocacy and advice and information. In terms of their impact, from 2019 to 2020, when we look at items of personal protective equipment, 289,000 in terms of PPE sent to 1,300 plus, shielding families to allow carers back into their homes during COVID-19. 2,711 children and young people supported by Wellchild nurses across the UK. 489 parents, carers and professionals trained through our Better at Home programme. 2,952 families received support from their peers through the Wellchild Family Tree Network. 93% said they felt supported by the group. Let's have a look at the two that Meghan retained. First one is SmartWorks. And in the words of the Duchess herself, the reason I was drawn to SmartWorks is that it reframes the idea of charity as community. It's a network of women supporting and empowering other women in their professional pursuits. And the charity says, we are incredibly grateful for the Duchess of Sussex for all that she does for the SmartWorks community and her continuous support. There's quite a large section within the article of various aspects of SmartWorks, but I'll just refer to one section on the website where it talks about the need for their service that they give. It's clear. For the individual, unemployment is one of the biggest causes of poverty and associated with physical and mental health challenges, high mortality rates and academic underperformance. For the state, one unemployed person costs £6,897 per annum in benefits and lost tax revenue. Joseph Rowntree Foundation, that figure came from. Following the pandemic, unemployment is predicted to peak in 2021 with 4 million out of work. The women we support are at greatest risk of economic hardship and discrimination. In the last year, 43% of clients had been unemployed for over a year. 25% had been rejected from over 50 jobs, 50, and 14% had been rejected from over 100 jobs. In addition, 40% were single mothers, 13% have a disability, and 52% were from an ethnic minority. I'll finish off this section in terms of the impact from SmartWorks and the work that they do. It says SmartWorks has a strong track record of success. 20,000 women have been supported. 62% were successful in finding work. 95% are more confident. The Mayhew Animal Charity. This charity has a long history and does a lot of community work, not just in the UK, and they have been severely hit in recent times, particularly to do with the pandemic. The Duchess of Sussex is a patron of Mayhew. Her chosen patronages reflect the causes and issues she has spent decades championing, including animal welfare. The Duchess has long understood the connection between animal and community welfare and has previously supported various rescue centres in Los Angeles. The Mayhew says they are thrilled that the Duchess shares their commitment to improving the lives of animals and people at home and internationally, and are extremely excited to make a real difference to dogs, cats and communities together. Activities that the charity gets involved in and how some of their money is spent. Rescuing and rehoming of stray, unwanted and abandoned animals. Animal welfare services providing help for vulnerable animals and pet owners. Free and low-cost preventative veterinary care. Neutering, vaccinations, parasite control, microchipping, etc. Training opportunities for those wanting a career in animal care or the veterinary profession, animal population management and rabies control overseas. The charity operates throughout England, Afghanistan and Georgia. I have got quite a detailed section. It's still a summary. There's more information on the website itself of their expenditure, the income that comes in, where it comes in from, and where the money goes out. I've also got a photograph of the director of the Mayhew branch in Afghanistan, and I've got information about the centre in Tbilisi. Dr. Abdul Jalil Mohammadazi, better known as Dr. Mo, is the Mayhew director in Afghanistan. He has been instrumental in improving animal welfare and raising veterinary standards in Kabul, negotiating with the authorities to stop the culling of free-roaming dogs and developing a mass canine rabies vaccination programme and a humane dog management programme in the city. He has also spoken at conferences worldwide and received several awards in recognition of his innovative work and dedication to animal welfare. The Mayhew, that is based in Georgia, works to improve the lives of free-roaming dogs, cats and communities in the Tbilisi and surrounding regions. Mayhew Georgia operates the following programmes in Tbilisi and works with national and local government bodies as well as grassroots organisations to improve the lives of both animals and people in Georgia. They provide a free spay and neuter service for street and community dogs in the capital, including vaccinations against rabies and the most common canine infectious diseases: distemper, parvovirus, canine hepatitis, canine influenza. High quality veterinary training that improves the skills and competencies of Georgian vets in accordance with international guidelines for small animal medicine. In terms of what they have achieved, 4,227 dogs neutered, 3,905 dogs vaccinated against rabies, 3,921 dogs vaccinated against common canine diseases, 5 vet professionals trained. It is fair to say that this charity is struggling at the moment. Staffing has been reduced, the number of veterinary appointments have been reduced, and the type of care given has to be prioritised, with some services severely curtailed. Sussex Squad, your help is needed in any way that you can. Staff cuts have been made, and it is possible that things could get worse. We can look at this outside of the podcast, and as per usual, we'll be hoping and looking for people to donate in the usual way, direct to the charity itself. So, as I said, I've just put it here as a flag, but it's something that I will be talking about, and hopefully others will be as well, outside of the podcast. And just to end, I remember earlier on in this podcast, I made a note that I've put it in the article for you to read, where it states on the Royal website that they look for organisations that are well established, that have a good financial record, keep good accounts, etc., etc. I thought that was quite... I would like to use the word comical, but I'll be polite. It just seemed a strange thing to say, knowing how, at various points, certainly in the decades that I've been on this planet, things have been mentioned about accounts and figures and creative accounting, to name but three phrases. Whether or not those things are true, it's neither here nor there. It's a perception, and perception to the individual is real. It seems a bit rich for an organisation that has that kind of phraseology following them around to demand that something much, much higher. So all I've put at the end is, and with reference to that point, kind of defeats the object if the number of investigations undertaken or being undertaken into certain patronages where funds submitted have disappeared into the ether. There is a question to be asked: if an organisation is already doing reasonably well, why is there a need for a royal patron? Why not raise the profile of those doing good work but who are short of funds, and with a raised profile could attract more and be able to widen the scope of their work? It just struck me, if it's an organisation that has a healthy amount of money coming in, it's just easier to make mistakes. That's all I will say on that front. So that's it in terms of private patronages and royal ones. The ones that were taken away from the Sussexes were charities that were given to them by the Queen. Whether she was handling them herself or what within the royal family, it's for her to give away. Therefore, she was within her rights to take them back. But I still say it was done on a punitive basis, because there are people doing the same, and in many cases far more, things that go against supposed protocol that's never been an issue until Harry and Meghan did something similar. So I question the way that they've taken that, but with hindsight, I think they did them a favour. And I personally am very, very pleased that Harry and Meghan are not in that 50-50 arrangement that they were asking for, that they are totally free. So what was meant to be a punishment given by the royal family to this couple has backfired on them big time. And not because of that, but in view of the last bit of research, detailed research done on the take-up, the activity by members of the royal family with charities that to have their name against it on paper, even if they were going to all of those in any kind of shape or form, it would represent a quarter of what's on paper that they're meant to be covering. And they're not doing a quarter of that. They're doing 1% of their time each year to a small number of charities. So to take those away from Harry and Meghan is just adding to their woes. So I can't see the sense behind it. I think it needs a complete overhaul anyway, because no one person can visit effectively and do any meaningful work apart from wave and cut ribbons, and having their name in their title or having royal in their title doesn't make one iota of difference. If it ever did, it certainly hasn't done in recent decades, and the figures prove that, and that's in the article, and I did mention some of those. They're no better than a country that has no royal family. So, and the ones that have got royal family, the UK, if at the end of it they're only doing a quarter of the work, covering a quarter of the total that they're meant to be covering, it's not doing good. There are a whole host, the majority of people have not seen them, have not heard anything, and I don't think their name on the letterhead is making a lot of difference in terms of how they're coping. But that's a personal view, and at the moment it's really not a problem for me. I support anything that Harry and Meghan do. Anything that Archwell cover, Sussex Squad will be there. We will support it. And when we hear of one that is struggling in any way, we will be there to make sure that we can uplift. Other than that, the rest of it is not my problem. They took it away for all the wrong reasons out of sheer spite. My feeling is you get on with it, all of you. You got what you wanted. You wanted the spotlight. You've got it now. All of Sussex Squad, we were never royalists in the first place, so it's nothing for us. We'll just focus where we've focused for the last 5 years on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Really, Harry and Meghan to us. So, that's it until next week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye from Ivy. Bye.